Welcome to the new season of the Hands of Shakti podcast. Today, we are thrilled to host Dr. Maithili Ganjoo, a renowned media sociologist and researcher specializing in social and behavior change communication. SPCC uses communication approaches as powerful tools to promote positive social change, and Dr. Ganjoo has been at the forefront of this field for over 3 decades. Through her research, campaigns, and workshops, Dr. Ganjoo has explored how communication, as well as historical context, can influence perceptions of gender and empower individuals to create change. Her insights into how gender dynamics play out in media and society bring a valuable perspective to the ongoing conversation about gender equality. I hope you enjoy listening to our new season. Please subscribe to stay tuned for more episodes. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Hands of Shakti podcast. And today, we're honored to have Dr. Maithili Ganjoo here with us. Hi, Dr. Maithili.
Hello, Suhani.
Thank you for being here. So, first, to start off the podcast, my first question to you is what led you to specialize in social and behavior change communication?
Okay, thank you so much. To begin with, I want to thank you and Hands of Shakti for inviting me to come and have a little chat with all of you. I am, as you know, Dr. Maithili Ganjoo. I'm an academician right now, but have been a development communication specialist almost all my life, and that's many, many years. So I specialize in communication, which means talking, speaking, and carrying forward messages to various communities around the world, and definitely about development issues. And that is where SPCC, which is Social and Behavior Change Communication, as a specialization, has emerged globally and has done very well in India. Uh, this is basically an attempt to look at various challenges that the country has in terms of, say, the health problems or issues regarding education levels and various developmental issues in which we speak or we try to communicate with the special communities, marginalized sections, women in particular, and understand what are the barriers to changes, what are the issues, how do we equip and empower communities to be able to live their life to the fullest, to be able to participate in the development of this nation, and to be good and empowered citizens. So my interest in this field is something that kind of came naturally after my education. I had a PhD in sociology way back in the early 1990s, and that is the time when the country was opening up to the new liberalization and new economic sort of policy was in place. And that was also the time when there was this whole development sector booming. And basically, that means the government was trying to put its policies and programs in place in order to have a equitable sort of progress of the nation, which
Yeah.
means that those pockets that needed to grow economically, socially, uh, they were being supported through various programs. So that's how I kind of came into it as a sociology student.
So, what do you think? Like you mentioned, how you reached out to marginalized groups and get them involved into, being there for the nation, getting some sort of identity. So, what strategies have you found most effective to reach them?
Uh, See, actually, there are two, three things. One thing is to be able to make identify who's marginalized. When we say
Yeah.
marginalized, we often talk about the economic aspect. So we look at people with lesser means to and access to, say, basic things like health or education. So there's this whole poverty dialogue or the poverty issue, which our country has been dealing with ever since independence. Uh, a lot of it has undergone change after the liberalization, where we see money is something that's now sort of more widely accessible uh, in terms of livelihood opportunities, in terms of access to, sort of private organizations and public organizations helping. Yet, uh, it's important to open up now the whole issue of marginalized, even to genders. So, if a household has income within the household, who has this access? Who is this access with? Is it the man who earns, or is it also the woman whose job, whose work, which is kind of not even seen or recognized, or does she have equal access? So you see, marginalized is a term which is now opening up and has opened up into even our social and everyday living. So if I were to use the same understanding to today's world, 2025, then digital accessibility is one of the means or one of the variables we use to understand who is marginalized, who is not. Who has
Yeah,
an access to, for instance, your podcast today?
yeah,
Is more empowered because that person is able to listen to the discussion we have, as against those who do not have an access to listening to the whole world of digital information today. So, this is like, looking at the concept of marginalized, but basically at a practical level, definitely we are talking about groups and people who may even have the money but do not have the resources, or do not have, or face cultural barriers to
to,
be able to access, to be able to access, uh, the right information, the right money to buy, to consume. And that's where I think your organization really is doing wonderful job, because uh, from what I have read and seen about Hands of Shakti, we are actually helping people come to that particular platform where their work can be seen, and their labor or their joy is distributed, marketed, and they have an access to be in this free capitalist world, to sell
yeah.
or to contribute. So
Yeah, I think with Handa Shakti, one of the main issues, like the reason why we started it, is one of the main issues we saw was that a lot of these women necessarily they weren't allowed, like culturally, they weren't allowed to have jobs because they came from families where they felt like it was beneath their dignity for a woman to work, and they weren't necessarily like from wealthy families, but it also does happen in wealthy families. It's not something that I think is based on income, but it also came from when you only have no financial independence and you're dependent on someone, you're controlled by someone for money. I think that's one of the main reasons that affects someone's self-esteem. And that, like from our project, even if you see their interviews, I think on our Instagram, a lot of the women through doing this work, it's really like, even though they're not just that little amount of money or having that feeling that they can buy something of their own or they can do something of their own, I think that was like one of the issues we wanted to help them do something, and we wanted, like, to give them an opportunity where they can build that sense of self-esteem. So,
yeah, absolutely.
my next question to you is, from your research, what do you think are the most pressing gender-related problems in India today?
So, from my research as well as from my experience, and I'm a pretty old person that way. I have sort of worked for decades now, 3 decades to be precise, and seen how the issue has evolved. If you ask me, the number one problem in India really is the gender problem. I mean, I really put it even before environment and poverty, or food issue, food crisis. I think this is something that even the government today is trying to recognize, but then again, the cultural barriers are so high. Why I say gender issue is a big issue is because even if we look at gender as binary, and we only look at women as the marginalized gender, We are talking about a huge resource that this country has. 50% of its people who over the years now do have education. They definitely have skills. And women, despite the common understanding of them being backward or not having had exposure, believe me, in whichever capacity they are existing, they have many, many more skills than we are ready to accept that they have. They have a better mindset, better temperament, and better value system, even if it comes from oppression. So that value system is of empathy, is of listening, of trying to reason out, of care and share. Now, unfortunately, in our patriarchal setup and in our global society, which is all about aggression and all about masculinity and the masculine value system, these very critical attributes of the feminine world are again marginalized. These are not even put as a value which helps you to look up to
Yeah.
people. So, having said that, when we look at this set of women not being able to exercise their own mind, their own rationality, and not having the agency to do this, uh, that in my mind is a very big problem. Because a nation cannot aspire to be the world's third economy and all those big economic and social targets unless 50% of its women are also contributing to that. Therefore,
Hun-
for me, gender issue is a very big issue. And as we were discussing yesterday, I do not look at gender only as a binary. When I talk gender, I talk about all the genders that we are exposed to or are getting aware of and are going to soon be recognizing and understanding exist
Yeah.
within ourselves. So so yes, it's a very big question and a very big issue when it comes to allocation of resources, allocation of who comes onto the table. I mean, sharing that place for alternate thinking. Gender is an absolute important thing for somebody like me and many like me who may or may not articulate it.
Yeah, I think also like you mentioned how certain feminine traits like softness and empathy, they aren't really valued. And these
Mm.
feminine traits necessarily aren't just in women as well. Like you particularly see it in women, maybe because of oppression, like you mentioned. But
No, because
even
of
like
our socialization. That's how women are. You see, now, I will, if I can I take 2, 3 minutes because I do want to use this podcast to clarify a few,
yeah,
misunderstandings that have cropped up when we talk of gender and women's issues.
mm,
So, one of the core thing that is to be understood is that what is this gender issue? It's what is this patriarchy? Because it's an abstract concept. We
yeah,
do not talk of a patriarchy. We start talking about objects that we can identify with and ideas we can identify with, like men and women. Now, patriarchy is actually a kind of belief system which has been very important for the society to function, in which what it decides or helps you do is put people in structures. And one of the important structure that we all live with is about status, is about who is in power and who is not. And
yeah,
this is not India, this is not just the world, this is not just today, this is not just a recent thing. This is happening for a long period of time where power and hegemony, and it will always be like that. It isn't like this is ever going to go away. It's always about power and power with few. And
yeah,
those few then decide who is doing what. And one of that who is doing what is gender roles. So while it's all right till here, where we said, okay, maybe men can look after the economic aspect, women look after the social well being, that's not a problem. The problem is when economy is put above the social contribution of a woman. And therefore, everything that the woman does or is expected to do becomes something that is hegemonically controlled by those few men who get the money on the table. This is part one of the problem. As a resolution to this problem, and also historically, when women stepped out to work, and that's a
Yeah.
historical fact, women actually stepped out to work more after the world wars. Okay, so in a feminist argument, we always say men decided to fight, and then when they were busy fighting, women had to step up, leave that home, and come out and work.
Yeah.
And when they started working, they were doing the dual role. But when men returned from the war, they were either maimed, some didn't return, either they were maimed or mentally they were like so sort of not there that a lot of them sat back at home, and others went back and took away those jobs or even started becoming the bosses in that, taking the power in those jobs, leaving the woman with the dual responsibility. And this construct that I'm talking about is something that we see even today, where all emancipated women may be out working, but they do come back, and the primary responsibility of the home still lies with them. And that, in my understanding, is the part two of the problem, where women have gone out without any support or any sharing of responsibility.
Yeah.
And this is something that we need to now mend, where men, instead of women and too much of women, being always targeted, men need to understand that while they go out, they have equal responsibilities at home. All
Yeah.
right. So if women had that shared responsibility, probably we wouldn't be where we are today. Like, especially in the virtual world, I see men and women fighting instead of getting together and fighting patriarchy, right?
It
Uh,
is.
and that's a problem. All right, that's a problem. So this is one part that I always want and wish to talk about, because youngsters today are in the digital world with very little attention span and very little time to really be well informed about concepts that they choose to talk about or have an opinion on, and which is okay, which is probably how this generation is going to evolve. It's a digital technology generation. But what is important is, as a communicator, I would say this, that it is important to know, to have the focus on the core of the knowledge that you have to know about how men and women will function together for the betterment of the society and their own good. And what is it that they have to give and take mutually in order to exist with dignity and equal access in this world.
Yeah.
So, so that's really it sounds very simple, and it is really simple. Where we go wrong is where our social roles do not come from the intent of getting it right, but from the intent of controlling the other.
Yeah.
All issues, if you look at them through this prism, that who's trying to control, you get the answer. Be it a relationship at home, parents versus children, spouses with each other, parents versus young, children or grown-up children, office boss versus you, uh, the government versus people, global scenario, wars, everything.
Yeah. It's
The
because
place, yes, the intention with which it is happening is all about control and power, and therefore there is a problem. Yeah.
yeah. My next question to you is about, like, we were talking about the influence of technology, and I think filmmaking in particular is one of like the major things that influence gender role, like the propagation of gender roles in society today. So, like recently, like with films, like successful Bollywood films like Animal and Kabir Singh, where I think that toxic masculinity and these really, I would in a way say, regressive gender roles were portrayed. What do you think that, like, how do you think that plays a role in shaping societal values?
Okay, so honey, now that's a very raw nerve you have touched. I'm a teacher of film studies, and I have a sort of
Yeah.
perspective on it, which I think is a little academic and analytical than just a fan's view. Uh, films have, you're absolutely right. I think are a very big influence in have always been actually in India, and now technology makes it all the more convenient. The accessibility has grown,
Yeah.
and films. This is like I'll just digress a little before I come to animal and other things, if that's okay with the podcast. Way back in 1989, when I was a student of sociology and I was doing my MPhil at Jawaharlal Nehru University, I actually chose to study Hindi films, and I chose to study Hindi films as a sociological institution. I mean, my thesis was actually arguing that in India the film industry is not just an industry. It's not just an art and creative place. It's like some. It's like an institution, like a family or a school or a college, where values and where ideas and even social mores are sort of constructed, portrayed, and reacted to by the society or the people watching it. This
Yeah.
is 89, and definitely today we know the engagement has risen. The industry has become a global entity. It's our soft power to deal with other nations. So it's huge, absolutely huge. At the same time, when you look at it, the industry which is growing and a creative field where human beings are getting trained to go and tell their story, uh, that opens up the whole horizon, because who are these people making films? What kind of thinking are they a part of? How have they been brought up, sorry, and what is it they're trying to bring out in their films? So it is
Mm.
often said that films mirror society,
Yeah.
and but of course that's a debate whether it works mirroring, or is it that they give the diktat and people follow. But we don't know the answer for sure. But we know for sure that whatever they show is something that the filmmaker, the producer, the definitely the director, you know, believes in and has a point of view, trying to tell you a story. So, to
Yeah.
that extent, when I look at these films, which have created a lot of uproar, uh, it is somebody trying to say something, all right? Uh, and it comes from a place of wanting to at least throw it up for the discussion, if not anything. So, these films have shown something that we call hypermasculinity, toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Interestingly, so Annie, my thesis on this is that this toxic masculinity and hypermasculinity is not a part of Hindi film culture, these portrayals. Uh, this is a part of the Western, more consumer driven, uh, capitalist economy that we are talking about. Because again, what is hyper masculinity? What is toxic masculinity? It's the height of that control, objectification of the other gender, and thinking that the other person is somebody that you own.
Yeah.
So
Someone beneath.
ownership, yes, and that's how you want to treat them with what you what looks like disgust, but you can define it as your your possession, and you romanticize that to be a value. So to that extent, yes, these films, and I'm glad the kind of response they have got in terms of criticism. But again, at the same time, while people criticize them, people also watch them, and there are some people who even support them. And
Yeah.
because the support again comes in the virtual world, most of it we've seen in the virtual world. I really don't know if people mean it, or people, because virtual world in itself has this issue of who am I? Who am I in my real life, and who am I in front of my device? These are two different set of. A lot of research shows you that many times what you are not in your real life, you are on your virtual life.
Yeah.
So so there is something that is giving the support to these characters, apart from, of course, the people with the art who are trying to say, oh, it's good acting, or not looking at the impact but looking at the product per se. That's a
Yeah.
different thing. But people who think this thinking is valid are people who have either been brought up with that thought. I mean, they probably have seen that in their own homes,
Yeah.
right? So they concur. Yes, that's the kind of relationship a father and son have. So that's alarming, definitely. Or these are people who really don't even understand why the other side, which is the women's emancipation side, is so important. Either
Mm.
way, it's important, and it is good that we are discussing all this, because everybody has a right to show the film they want to show. And if you don't like it, don't watch it. That's the kind of argument. And I agree to some extent that everybody should have a place in this on the table. But whether it is impacting wrongly or rightly uh, is again something that we have to be mindful of. It's not that the film showed and people agreed. It's like people agree and then they associate with that representation, because there are other sides of it also which people do not want to accept. Not because it's bad art, because you're not prepared for it, probably. So hyper masculinity is very much a Western concept and construct which has come to India. Because if you look at our Indian ethos and the way we look at art and we look at ideal types, we have always looked at hyper masculinity more like a villain. Even if you go back to your Ramayana and your Duryodhana, the Mahabharats, Ravan and Duryodhana, they're all hyper masculine men and they're not heroes, right?
Yeah.
And that's a part of our ethos. We every year we celebrate Dashera to kind of quash that hyper masculinity, because hey, we also know there were a lot of good qualities which Ravan had. Ravan
Yeah.
was a very educated big man, right? But we burn him,
Yeah.
right? So it's not that this is something as a culture we don't understand. So while and coming getting back to the films, one more point. While in the 70s we really had our probably our biggest hero who was mass toxic masculine, not toxic, he was hyper masculine. That was the characters played by Amitabh Bachchan in his best films. But remember, it's the same time when we have a characters played by Amol Palekar in Basu Chatterjee's films, Golmaal and Damad, and many of those characters, which was the soft Indian masculine identity that
Yeah.
was equally hit. So, just to blame a cinema or a representation uh, is sort of to be looked at a little seriously. And to say that films like Animal or what's the
Same.
other one?
Kabir
Yeah,
Singh.
should Kabir Singh should not be there. Uh, is like, not wanting to address the issue because if not on cellulite, there are Kabir Singhs in real life, so we cannot wish them away. I personally think let them bring it on. Let's have a discussion though, uh, in order to understand, uh,
I think
you know.
the issue was with these movies was with like I don't think it was the fact that they were successful. It was the people who were genuinely trying to justify what was being shown. That side of the internet. But again, that comes in like people aren't going to come. Like, it's very rare to meet someone who you meet in real life who's going to tell you that, oh, I really agree with these ideals. It's much easier to go online when you can't be.
Yeah, no, and there are softer ways of saying the same thing. That influencer you were talking about yesterday when we were having the chat. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the hyper masculinity. The core of his understanding is that woman is my property. I deal it, and this is how we were in the 17th, 16th century. Women were actually properties, considered to be the property of women of men, and that's
Yeah.
why the whole feminist movement came into place, right? Which is something that in India we did not have to go through. We had our own ways and we had our own issues, of uh, inequality and patriarchy. But yeah, very much these films have become interesting points to
Of the
raise the issue. Yeah.
So my last question to you is, what are your hopes for the future of media and communication, and in driving some sort of social or behavioral change
You said social behavior change through media, huh?
through media? Like, what are your
Huh.
hopes in the future? Yeah.
Yeah. So you see, the most important thing in media today, and even in social media particularly, is the fact that it gives everybody a chance to say, even if it is not intelligent, even if it is abusive, but everybody can express. Which is very good, which is very democratic, and that's very nice. But at the same time, what people ignore is the fact that when you open your mouth, you should be responsible, and that sort of comes with some education, some understanding of whatever you are talking about. So when
Yeah.
it comes to social and behavior change, which is really about social and behavior change, is nothing but having complete empathy towards whatever is happening and why it is happening, to be able to understand that why are things not happening the way they ought to, and that ought to is about giving access and power to the people and identifying those barriers. Now all these things, all this concept will be clear only if people are well informed. So one thing
Yeah.
which social media can do is be able to inform rather than only propagate, which is what is happening. The kind of, everybody speaks and nobody censors. Not that I'm for censorship, but self censor, is so important. Number two, what is important is for people to understand that there is a difference between an opinion and evidence based fact.
Yeah.
When I tell you that I'm wearing mauve, it's a fact. You can see I have three, four ways of identifying what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
if I am just saying I'm wearing pink and I don't have any evidence, and you start talking about pink and you say whether it suits me, doesn't suit me, we are just going into what we call fake news, you know,
Yeah.
wrong news. So as long as social media is able to educate people, or people have media literacy and they understand how much to take and how much to throw, no change, no positive change can come out of it. And that's like very important. I'm personally not in favor of government policies on everything because that's clamped down. But I do sincerely believe that people who use a lot of social media or who communicate a lot read up, understand, discuss, debate, and opinionate later. I mean, giving opinions should be the last stage of any communication. the first stage is really about knowing, understanding, discussing,
Yeah.
handling barriers, and having empathy to an alternate viewpoint, and then seeing what is the common minimum at which we can deal with each other or on everything with some dignity and discussion. And then comes the phase where an opinion comes, and it's
Understand. Yeah.
okay if people don't want to take that. That should be okay. You can
Yeah.
reject an opinion without rejecting the person, you know.
Yeah, I think that's what the problem happens today as well. A lot of people just jump on, there's some conspiracy theory or some bandwagon going, even with minimal evidence, people will just jump onto it and form their opinion based on that. And then
So,
it's
so,
only, yeah,
so, honey, you have to also understand, and I tell this to a lot of my youngsters in my life, that a lot of what happens on social media, I hope young people know, is always orchestrated and marketed
by
by
PR.
brands, or brand doesn't mean only commercial brands, by even political brands or political ideas. So if you want people engagement, because this medium gives us that opportunity to reach out to the masses and immediately get what we want to get out of them.
Yeah,
Therefore, a lot of people manipulate. Like, a lot of this whole hyper masculinity thing, about not
yeah,
talking of hyper masculinity, but talking about the person, makes it more of a argument about a thing which is not even a part of the discussion, right?
yeah,
Whether it is fans of any K-pop, uh, group, that whole engagement of this versus that, and this fighting this, and viral stories, these at some point are really orchestrated. They're not organic. As long as consumers of social media are aware of this and know that they're playing a game, that's a different thing. Then you are ready to play that game, and that gives you some sort of satisfaction. Then that's a different matter altogether. Because do not forget that as we talk of progress today, and that's like the final thing I would like to say, the biggest problem that this generation has and this time has is the mental health issue, which
yeah,
we cannot take for granted. And each one of us are potentially victims of some sort of mental stress issue. And
yeah,
I'm not sure how many of are in acceptance of it, leave alone seeking help and therapy, uh,
yeah,
which is really required in today's time, which is at a pace that is like phenomenally uh, high, right?
yeah.
So,
I still think there are taboos related to that, but I think people nowadays are more open to discussing it and are more open
hmm,
to accepting that because it has become more normalized. Like, I think a
hmm,
lot of
hmm,
people, like, when in your own friend circle or in your own social circle,
hmm.
you know, people who are taking therapy and people are open about it, then you're also
Good,
more open
good.
to exploring that as an option. So I think times are
Yeah.
changing that way.
Absolutely, absolutely have to. So, keeping all that in mind, therefore, coming back to your basic thing, which is about how do we help, or how do we facilitate? Help is a very condescending word, but how do we facilitate the participation of marginalized sections, economically marginalized, very, very important, and I guess pretty much doable, like your initiative itself is doing. Government has a lot of programs and policies which, and so do the corporate world, which has money. They have their own CSR projects with which they are trying to streamline and offer these opportunities. More importantly, how do we normalize, or how do we make it possible that at the social level, women participate equally? Uh, it is going to be possible if one, as I said, understands that all work or all roles in life have to be shared. If women go out and get themselves a place, then men have to also stay back a little bit more and look after home. And this is something that the woman should be deciding, not the man. And whether she wants to be in or out, and how much of our contribution is going to be where, and the acceptance of the fact that we are very much now uh, looking at 50% of our population, at a national level, the women, to contribute equally to the economy, and therefore get that kind of support from home and from society.
I
So,
think
of
that's
course, then making that possible, that's a challenge for today's time, which is what we have to. I think gone are the times we were questioning whether women should. Of course, women should. We all know that. In India,
yeah.
especially, all women are doing fantastically well at every stage and every level, right? But it's about facilitating uh, this transition that we need to worry about. And as I said, women is just a placeholder for entire range of genders that are still seeking acceptance, and high time that we start doing that.
Yeah.
Accept that this
As
is
a
a
society,
social construct.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and everybody has a right in this
Yeah.
democratic nation to be heard and to access all good.
To- yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
So
so
I hope.
much for doing this. Really,
Thank you, thank you. It is
yeah.
my pleasure to put forth my sort of experience and opinion also. But again, as I said, I try my best to base it on evidence and fact, and something that is not just because I think so, but because data tells you people, these are realities, whether it is on the cellulite in real life. And I want
Yeah.
to end up by sort of thanking you, A, and B, congratulating you on your great initiative. Please carry this on. My
Thanks.
best wishes for this year and for future as well. Lovely talking to you. Thank you, Suhani.